I hope I put on a good show for you. There's Alice. Hi, Alice.
Hi, Brian. It's 1 a.m. here, but I'm making it so far.
Oh, I'm honored to have you here. Thank you.
Oh, sorry about that, Lindsay.
Hi, Brian from St Albans.
No problem. Mom,
Steve.
Hello. all the way from England.
Yeah, Wendor is here.
Yeah.
I'm Michelle. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Brian.
Don't stop talking.
Asa.
Hey, I know you as Mr. Daldorph, but hey.
Hello. Great to see you.
Hi, Dad.
Hey, Brian, it's Julie.
Hey, Dad.
Oh, hi.
It's your daughter. It's your daughter.
I know you. You're in Montana.
I'm in Montana. This is so cool seeing everyone from everywhere.
Hola.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Laura.
Hi, how are you?
Great to see you.
Me and Philu here.
Yes.
Hello. You've come a long way.
Yeah, I come from afar.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming, Laura. I so much appreciate
No, I'm
it.
happy to be here. It's 9 p.m. here.
Oh, that's not too bad. Yeah.
Hi, Brian.
It's your other daughter.
Hello.
Oh, this is so exciting. Well, hello, folks. I am Lindsay Garcia. I am the publicist with Meadowlark Press, who has just published Brian's new poetry book, Kansas Poems. I'm going to go ahead and mute you all and tell you some things about what to expect tonight. Does that sound good?
Yeah,
Super.
sounds good.
Thank you all for being here. We really, really appreciate it. This is incredibly exciting. All right. Over in the corner, we also have Tracy Millian Simmons, our publisher. And of course, we have Brian tonight. I am going to walk you through a few Zoom things just so we can all be on the same page. Maybe this is new to some of you and maybe it's old hat for others by this time. We are recording this so we can post the recording later and some of the highlights of the recording. So if you have any friends who happened to miss it tonight, I know some of you are staying up super late to be here, so maybe you want to share it with them. We will make sure that that is available on the Meadowlark website. All right, so we are going to have Brian read to us, of course, and afterward, we are also going to open the floor for some discussion, some words of congratulations, a Q&A, however you want to fill that time. You are welcome to type any questions or comments you have in the chat box. Down on the bottom of your screen, you will have the option to open the chat box. I will say hello in there so you can see where it pops up. And I will be sharing some helpful links there with you as well. You can also click participants if you would like to see who all is on here. That can be kind of fun. And under reactions, you can applaud, or if you wanted to celebrate or raise your hand with a question, you are welcome to do that as well. And if anybody has any questions about those Zoom features at any point, feel free to message me privately about that. All right. If you are comfortable, then you are in a good spot. If you are uncomfortable, I encourage you to get comfortable. We have a bunch of our cameras on, which I so very appreciate. It makes it feel like much more of an audience engagement when we have our cameras on. If you don't want to put your camera on, that is fine as well. All right, so on the Meadowlark website, which is meadowlark-books.com, I'll paste that in the chat. You will find some info about Brian, including some media coverage he has received, as well as how to purchase his book. I will paste those in the chat box as well. I encourage you to go check that out. And if you haven't gotten a copy of the book, we would love it if you would scoop up a copy. We shipped out a ton of copies already, so you should be getting yours in the mail soon if you haven't already. We also made sure that you can order these books internationally. So I am going to post a few different ways you can order internationally if you haven't yet already. Again, all those links are in the chat box. If you have not yet followed Meadowlark on social media, may I please invite you to do so. We have lots of excerpts that we post of Brian's book as well as other books, a lot of event updates, and some fun book giveaways, all sorts of good things on there. All right. Today is a special occasion because it is Brian's mother's birthday. Miss Joan Margaret would have celebrated her birthday today. She passed away in 2015, but we still love the opportunity to recognize her tonight. So keep her in your heart as we move along this evening. Before Brian takes the stage, Tracy has a few words to say about publishing Kansas poems. So Tracy, I will let you take it from here, and then I will share a little bit more about Brian.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm not sure I ever imagined that Meadowlark would have an international audience. This is so exciting. What a turnout. I'm honored to have worked with Brian Daldorph on this book, Kansas Poems. And you know, when you're a publisher of poetry, you always create a mental list of poets you would like to work with. Brian probably doesn't know that he's been on my list for a while, but he has been. I was thrilled to see him as a finalist in the Birdie Poetry Prize competition, and working with him on this book has just been a delight. I also want to very quickly say a special word of thanks to Lindsay Garcia. She's been with us since August, and I honestly don't know how I would have finished 2020 without her. Meadowlark has gone from publishing 1 to 2 books a year to, I lost count, 6, 7, 8 last year. And I'm just so excited to have Lindsay on board, and she's really helping us in this season of growth for Meadowlark Press. So thank you all for coming, and I'll pass it back to Lindsay.
Thank you, Tracy. I really appreciate it. This is one of the coolest jobs ever, and I really am so proud of what Meadowlark does and so honored to work with authors like Brian. It's the coolest job ever. All right, let me tell you a little bit about the man of the hour. I wrote this up a little bit, so it might sound exactly like I'm reading it. I first met Brian in Oak Hill Cemetery just earlier this week. It seems like the appropriate poetic thing to do, right? We had been virtually chatting for weeks prior, but it really wasn't until we were on those grounds, appreciating life and death together, where Brian really came alive to me as a person and in his craft. As we were walking, Brian spoke of his need to write, mostly poetry, but other forms as well. Sometimes writing is the only thing that gets us through to a better place. In tragedy and in celebration, writing helps us open our perspective and be more receptive to what's going on inside and around us. Brian listens very carefully to his world, both the land and its inhabitants. In an interview, he said, "My writing most often begins when I start to think about, in the words of Sister Helen Prégine, what really matters to me and to the people around me." Some of what really matters to Brian is the work he does as a teacher at Douglas County Jail. The book includes a shout out to his writing team there, and Brian credits that experience for inspiring a significant amount of his writing. He said, "The writing in the jail class was so vivid and so often focused on the Kansas experience. How could I not be influenced?" The state of Kansas means a great deal to Brian, hence this new collection's name, Kansas Poems. He has lived half of his life in Kansas and has been impacted by the people and places in these poems, including the University of Kansas, where he also teaches, the Kansas River, and Oak Hill Cemetery. Brian said he believes he has grown well in this rich soil, and that's apparent. Even though Brian is originally from England, he tells people he's from Kansas, and then usually tells his more complicated story. Brian originally came to the States for his master's and doctorate degrees. and work at KU brought him to and kept him in Kansas. He often traveled back to England to visit his parents. Though his mother passed away in 2015, again, we would like to take a moment to remember her on this day, her birthday. Brian also lived in Japan, Senegal, and Zambia. In Kansas, Brian's love for teaching at KU makes him wish he could do it all over again. Both of his daughters even graduated from KU. Brian understands that Lawrence is not a place he's just passing through. He found himself buying a house, putting down roots, gathering a community, and writing along the way. He knows how much the poems in this book mean to him in helping him make sense of things and helping him to express what he thinks is so important. His hope is that these poems could be meaningful to others and perhaps even inspire others to write because of something they come across in his work, some poem that says something they really need to hear. Everyone has a story to tell, and you'll hear some of those stories tonight. This is just a bit of Brian's story. I'm happy to share it with you, and I'm happy we're all sharing this part of his story together. Now, if you have an available drink, may I please make a toast? To Brian and to the state of Kansas. Congratulations, Brian. Woo! That is all I have. Brian, would you like to take the stage? We'll have you go ahead and unmute. Perfect. Whenever you're ready, Captain.
So am I on now because I can still see you?
Yes, you're still on. You're on now.
I'm on. Okay, great. Thank you. So everybody can hear me okay? Yes, good. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you so much to all of you for coming to this and being a part of this. I just feel very blessed to know you all, and thank you. Some of you are coming a long way to do this, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. So what I'd like to do today is to read a number of the poems from the book and talk a little bit about them. But first, I just want to say thank you to Tracy and Lindsay and Kevin Rabus. They've all been very much associated with Meadowlark Press. And as you can tell, it's just been great to work with them. There's just so much good energy. And please check out what they're publishing. There's just some great work that they're publishing, a lot to do with this region, but some other things too. And I've really enjoyed reading their other books that they publish. And I'd like to thank Laura Chalar and Matt Porubsky and Kevin for writing endorsements for the book. That was great, and it just meant a lot to me to have their endorsements for the book. So thank you. So I'd like to begin by reading the first poem in the book, and it's a poem that I think we can all relate to. Now, I wanted to start with a poem that sort of gives us hope, and that was the reason why this was the first poem in the book. I spoke to my sister today in England, and she said that they have daffodils in England already, and it just seems that we're a long way from daffodils here. We've got a lot of tough weather coming next week. But this is the first poem in the book, and it's called Unfreezing, and it's about the hope for spring, the hope for renewal that we have all the time. And it just seems that's very much what we need at the moment. Unfreezing. First daffodils outside City Hall facing south. Spray of crocuses in the front yard of 829 East 13th. And in his heart, all the flowers of spring waiting only for warmth. The second poem is kind of related to that. It's just about the brief flowering of the magnolia, which is a beautiful thing that happens every year, but it just happens very briefly. And for me, that was a metaphor for the short space we have sometimes to do the right thing. And if we don't do the right thing, then we have to live with the consequences of it. So the metaphor that I use in the poem is of the magnolia. It's called Magnolia in May, Lawrence, Kansas. What we did in my parents' garden, we should have done for our marriage. Plucked off brown, withering petals of the magnolia, dropped them in a black bucket so strong new buds could push through. My mother showed us how to do it. We did it in her garden, didn't do it at home, and then it was too late for flowers. Then I'd like to read this poem, and I'm sure that this will mean a lot to quite a number of you. This is about Meningers in Topeka. It has such a fantastic story. The story of this hospital, of course, it's moved now. It's in Houston now, and the poem is called Meningers, Topeka, May 2008, and it was about visiting the old campus of the hospital. And so I had this image of the hospital. It was sort of run down, and it was sort of falling apart and fenced off. And I just realized that that seemed to be just the way that I felt at certain times in my life. So the poem started with that image, and then it became something a little bit more. Meningers, Topeka, May 2008. It's closed for business now. So if your mind's walls are cracked, your windows broken, if your foundation's slipping and you need a new roof after the hailstorm, Meningers can't help you anymore. Boarded up windows, the famous clock stopped, fences up to keep the bums out, the look and reek of decay. You'll have to find some other place for repair. Just like you, Meningers is falling down. When my daughter Brenna read this manuscript, she's just a really great editor. And also thanks to Brenna for the cover of the book. Apart from everything else that she does, she's also a really good photographer. So I always ask her for her photographs when I'm working on something. And I love the cover of this book, which Tracy helped with as well. When Brenna read this book, she said certain things about it that I just hadn't realized. And she said that as she read through the poems, there seemed to be a lot of people going missing. And I hadn't realized that, but in rereading the book, I realized that a number of the poems about people who for one reason or another go missing. This is a poem called Missing Husband. It was a cold spring morning, sunny with a clear sky, when Hank left the dishes half done, grabbed his jacket and keys, and drove off in his Ford truck. Didn't take his wallet. Didn't take anything but his truck and himself. Ever since then, and how many years has it been, Mabel has been asked over and over, what was it that made him leave like that? There must have been something. What was it? Women know these things, know if a man's happy or not happy, know if he's got his eye on some other woman, know if another woman's got her eye on him. She can smell it on him. But there was nothing, that's what Mabel tells them, nothing. Apart from that one thing, but no one else needs to know about that, such a thing between a husband and wife. You must have heard something, a postcard from Las Vegas or a phone call late one Tuesday evening, something. But there was nothing, she insisted, nothing. Apart from that one thing, that she'd torn it up and burnt it. when my dad visited in the year 2000, I think that was one of his last visits here, we went up to Kansas City together. My dad wanted to see the Churchill sculpture there. Some of you might know the Churchill sculpture. And when we were there, we also went to see the Vietnam War Memorial. And so I worked on this poem for so long, and it started out being quite a long, detailed poem, but I cut back on it and cut back on it until it's really just a few lines now, but these seem to me the most important lines. And you read these names on the memorial and you just wonder, who were they? What was their story? And that's what I wrote about in this poem. It's called Kansas City Vietnam War Memorial, April 2000. American flag snapping, cool, cloudy afternoon. Cars on Nichols Parkway. Dirty flowers and dry petals on concrete. Plastic model GI. What was Felix Pacheco's agony? Jack Renfro's last word? James Smith's? What happened to the 5 Moors? Who cried when Larry Pettit didn't come home? And then I'd like to move to the summer section. And probably most all of you know that this region used to be a shallow inland sea. And this was a poem that that really came about from driving to Manhattan through the Flint Hills and just looking out on the magnificent landscape there, and just thinking that has been around for so long and it will be here for so long, and we are just here so briefly. That's what it felt like looking out at the Flint Hills. Sailing to Manhattan, Kansas. We look out together at the still green waves of the Flint Hills. We're seeing the same things people saw hundreds of years ago. This land's too wild to be tamed. Might as well try to chain the sea. You say you'd like to come here in winter to see the vast snowscape. We're here such a short time compared to the rise and fall of this dry inland ocean. We take a few photographs and move on. And then we live close to Oak Hill Cemetery, and I've just spent a lot of time there. I've always liked cemeteries. They just seem like very special places to me for a lot of reasons. So quite a number of these poems are about Oak Hill Cemetery, which just seems to me a very important part of my life here. This one was written in 2002, and it's a sonnet. In fact, I was writing sonnets at the time. There's a reference in the poem to the Civil War graves in the cemetery, and the last line of the poem, you might recognize it, is a reference to Dylan Thomas's famous poem, "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night," which is one of the great poems of the 20th century, I think. Oak Hill Cemetery, June 2002. Never enough time. Never enough time to walk in this old graveyard thinking about their lives. Colonel Ulrich's last drink to his brave men who stood their ground and died. The widow mourning a love she'd lost, crying when she looked back on a life filled with grief. Annie married at 17. She'd tried to be a good wife. Carson dead at 26, with nothing on his grave to say why his life had been such a brief song. Mother dead in childbirth, 2 lives lost at once. all the lives and deaths unread, all the ones who knew that it was their time to die, who closed their eyes and went gently into that good night. And then I want to read one more from that section. This is called The Prodigal Son. And it began with a story somebody told me about parents getting much older, and then one of their children went home to look after them, you know, quite a common situation. And the son who came home, one thing that kind of struck me about this was they said that the son had been basically living off the grid. He didn't have a driving license, didn't pay taxes, didn't fill in any government forms or anything like that. So he was just kind of sort of off the grid and sort of had no connection in many ways. And so he was the son who came home to look after the parents. The prodigal son goes home to his parents' house, the only one of their kids free of his own family commitments, to look after them in their late years. He doesn't take anything back with him, doesn't need anything, sits with them in the morning, swims in the afternoon, stick-thin arms hauling him through the tepid water of Clearwater Lake. Most days his parents are fine, so he spends his time reading every book in the house, walking downtown to the coffee shop, where he stares out at people busy with their lives. When nothing matters anyway, it might as well not matter here, where he can at least be useful, where every other night he can cook chili dogs and corn, get half drunk in his room on homemade wine. And now it is time for fall. The book is divided into the 4 seasons. It just seemed that the poems kind of worked well together in that way, so that's how they're organized. The first poem in that section is an elegy for the small towns of America. And, you know, we look around at so many small towns and they seem to be going through something like I describe in this poem. So this is a fictional small town, but I think it's typical of sort of a lot of what is happening in America for reasons which I think we're all kind of aware of. Cooper City. Storefronts boarded up, but Jack's Autos is still there, with rust buckets, non-starters, and Crooked Jack, who left half a leg and most of his soul in Vietnam. Where Zach's gas used to be, there's a quick shop. High school kids used to hang out at Zach's, but they're long gone to that new school in Taylorville. Main Street's a few hand-me-down stores, some sleepy attorneys, and Zeke Haskins, undertaker, with old Zeke in the window, wondering days on end if he or Cooper City will go first. And then this next poem is for Jocelyn, my dear friend Jocelyn. We were driving to Topeka together one Saturday morning because our daughters were running in a cross-country meet, and we suddenly realized we were at the gate of hell. Would you believe it? We were at the gate of hell, which is, of course, those of you who know that particular urban myth, is Stull Cemetery. So this is a poem called Damned for Jocelyn. This sunny Saturday morning, my friend and I are driving past Stull Cemetery, fenced off behind a new, shiny wire fence. That's the gate of hell, I say. It might well be teeming with devils just below the surface. They might well be massing there for a final attack on our world. But we don't care. We don't care. We're happy driving down Highway 24, talking about our damn families. This poem is for one of my students, and it's called Ex-Footballer. And it's a sad story, but I just wanted to pay tribute to him. I knew him quite well. Ex-footballer. They say he changed. Now he's moody all the time. Spent hours alone in his room, headphones on. He'd always been a happy kid. Loved sport, of course. His dad took him to games and told him, "Don't believe the crap about players getting hurt. This game makes you a man." He played in junior high, hit hard. Nothing felt better than that. Played in high school, where they called him Suicide, because he'd hunt down the biggest guys. Got a scholarship at a JUCO, then recruited by a Big Ten school. Missed his junior year through injury. Then, in his last season, took a hit that knocked him out. He was never the same after that. What to do without his team? Where to go? Where to go? To Miller's Creek with a gun and be done with it, all done. I got to know John Musgrave in 1991, I think, when I met him at a reading for poets reading against the First Gulf War. And John read these poems that I thought were amazing. It was just some of the best writing that I'd ever heard about war from anybody, anywhere. And since then, I've gotten to know John really well. And I know that some of you know him. And he was, of course, featured in the Ken Burns documentary. I'd always wanted to write something about John because he'd just been a huge figure in my life. But I mean, I just didn't know how to do it. And then after I'd known him for about 20 years, I was in a writing class, and we were doing some free writing in class. And I wrote this poem, and I finally realized I'd been able to say what I wanted to say about John. So I'd like to read that one now. And it's very much a Kansas story in any number of ways. It's called Tug of War. My friend John was so badly wounded in Vietnam that he knew he was dying. He'd seen a lot of guys with chest wounds, like his wound, a sucking wound, and none of them survived it. He prayed, he tried to make his peace with God. Then by some miracle he's still trying to figure out, he did survive it. Spent 18 months in the hellhole of hospital, recovering from that wound. When he staggered out of that hospital, all he wanted to do was to go back to his war, where he had a gun in his hand and knew who his enemies were, where he knew who his enemies were, where he knew his buddies would never let him down. No one could say he hadn't done his part, so surely he could go home now. But all he felt was the tug of war. The next poem is for my friend Gary Leckleiter. I met Gary in the 1990s, and Gary told me a lot of stories about Kansas. Gary is one of my favorite poets, a great storyteller, and this poem is definitely for him. It's called Poet at the Door for Gary Leckleiter. On a sunny Sunday afternoon in Kansas in fall, you tell about Kansas killers, the one-step, two-step snake, one step and you're dead, two steps if you're lucky, the copperhead with venom to kill a cow, tarantulas migrating north, scorpions, the brown recluse spider that bit your friend and stripped off a chunk of his calf, the black widows your dad would flush out of dry gutters and squash under his work boots, but they'd be waiting in outhouses and dreams with that one bite to freeze your limbs and damn your lungs. Later, when I haul out trash, that unnerving smile you left me with makes entering my garden shed a matter of life and death. pretty dangerous place to be in Kansas, you know, if you believe Gary's stories. Okay, I am now into the final section called Winter. And I'd like to read this poem. It's called A Park with Yellow Whales. And I think for me, poems start in different places. They start with something that somebody says, or something that I see, something that I hear, an image. This poem started with seeing a woman at a park in December, just sitting there. And I kind of wondered what she was doing there. And the poem is kind of my story about what she's doing there. I mean, I've always liked to kind of see people and imagine their stories. You know, I guess that's what anybody with any sort of artistic interest does. I mean, you see the world and you try to explain it in the stories that you tell. A Park with Yellow Whales. She stops off at the park on Holmes and Delaware with slides, swings, merry-go-round, and yellow whales. Cold as her heart out here in December wind, and that's why she likes it, sitting on the park bench like some young mother watching over her invisible kids, yelling, chasing, playing tag. She lights up her first cigarette in 15 years. If her mother could see her now, she'd be laughing bitterly. She told her that Jack was no good. She feels her mother's scorn, like this icy northwesterly cutting through the yellow whales, biting into her white, white bones. I did a reading for Huascar Medina, the current Kansas poet laureate, and I read this poem, and Huascar said something about it which was so insightful, and it made me think back about this poem. It was one that I wrote a long time ago. It's called Andean Condors at the Topeka Zoo in Kansas. So this was from quite a long time ago, I think, when my kids were young and we took a trip to Topeka Zoo, and there were these poor Andean condors in a cage sort of hobbling around. I'll read the poem and then I'll just mention what Huascar said about it, which I thought was exactly right. And I think it made me realize what I was trying to do in the poem, which maybe I didn't at the time. Andean Condors, Topeka Zoo, Kansas. Condors hobble around their cage on stupid feet, seeking holes to escape through to stretch their glider wings. They jerk along like chickens with beady red eyes and nothing to catch but feeding times. Eccentric gown professors cut off from the heights, mocked by chatting sparrows and starlings flitting in and out through netting. All the way from the Andes to Topeka, Kansas, black and white peacocks, wigless judges, watched by the thick-lensed boy in a wheelchair, flapping his arms. And when I read that poem, Huascar said, yeah, I mean, that's a poem about not being able to fly. And I thought that's exactly right. And I think it's for anybody who's in a situation where they can't be who they want to be. And this poor condor, which is just such a magnificent bird, is just stuck in this cage, sort of hobbling around with these wings that really don't make sense there. It was nice to go back to that poem and think about it again after writing it a long time ago. I'd like to read 3 more poems, and this one is called The Visit, and this one is taken from my experience working in jails, not only Douglas County Jail, but other jails too. I think that one of the things I do in my writing, which I think most people do, is that when you write something, you're sort of bringing together a lot of different experiences, and those experiences are sort of brought together into one place, into one narrative. So this poem called The Visit is about parents visiting a son in prison. And it's sort of a composite of different stories, different people put together into this single narrative. And I read this, this is for my wonderful teaching team at the jail. This is for Mike Hartnett and Antonio and Sherry and Aya. We've got this great team there. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to go to the jail since March because of the pandemic, but we'll try to get back in there and carry on with the work that we've been doing there. The visit. Good visit, we say. Fine visit, actually. We'd driven across state to the penitentiary. Looked like an army base as we drove up to it. Razor wire, guard towers, breeze block buildings. It's Sadness City, my wife says. We didn't expect that Anthony would look so good. He's clean, he's gotten pudgy, his face looks fuller, his eyes quite lively. We'd been expecting someplace dirty and dingy. In fact, it's clean and full of light, maybe too much light. We ask Anthony how he's doing, and he says, a day at a time, you know, can't do it better than that. That's how everyone says you have to get through time in here. If you start thinking about how many days you have left, you go crazy. Anthony talks about AA and NA meetings, says he's met a counselor, Jackie, he really likes. She says she'll work with me on the outside too. He tells us that his sentencing's on March the 1st, and his attorney thinks he might get 6 years for a first offense, might have to serve 3. Then I'll get out of here and I won't ever come back. It's so boring. Emily doesn't want to know about how boring it is. She has other questions to ask, but doesn't know how to ask them. Are you safe? Does anyone try to do anything to you? Anthony says he's been finding out about chef school. That's a profession he could really go for. And there's more of a future in it than there is in crime to support my drug habit. We laugh because we know Anthony wants us to laugh, to show we acknowledge that he's so much on top of things he can laugh about them. I hear Emily gasp when Anthony, after saying goodbye, turns away. A good visit, we say, a fine visit. Then we hold each other in our cold car, both of us sobbing, shaking, as the late afternoon light of a winter's day drains away. And then I'll read 2 more poems right towards, they're the last 2 poems in the book, actually. The penultimate poem is called Camaro, and it was a poem that I wrote a number of years ago, but it just seems to me a very topical poem at the moment. I think the characters in the poem are just characters that we can recognize at this moment. Again, it tells a story in a way. Camaro. The day he lost his job at the car parts factory, my dad pulled up outside our house in a new cherry red Camaro. He took his time getting out so the neighbors would see. Winter sun shone down on us like God was peeking out of heaven. When I ran out to him, my dad smirked. Want to come for a spin? I touched the shiny paint like it was a bright red crucifix. I asked him whose car it was. Mine, he said, ours. He explained how the bank liked to help good men get what they want, and that sounded good to me. But even as my father drove fast down Honeywell, left at the lights, I knew that my mother might not take this well. That was later. Dad was happy. Swell, he said, this is swell. I didn't know about the terrible things that would happen next. My dad was driving his new cherry red Camaro, and we were the kings of the streets. And then this is the last poem in the book, and it's called Estate Sale. And I think it just seemed right to end the collection with an estate sale. The poem is kind of under the influence of one of my favorite poems by Thomas Hardy called During Wind and Rain. And the last image of Hardy's poem is a raindrop sliding down a gravestone. And that image has always kind of stayed in my head. But this poem was from my neighbor here in Lawrence, an old lady who died, and all of the things in her house were sold off in an estate sale. Estate sale. All day Saturday, a crowd at my neighbor's house on 13th Street, empty for 5 years. The auctioneer rattles off his call, $1, $1, $1.50, $1.52. You know how they do it. Can't do it like they do, but you get the point. There's not much left of her life. Boxes of junk sold off as lots for a few dollars to traders in bib overalls and baseball caps. 23 chairs, good for firewood, on the sidewalk. Thermometer registering 53 degrees in February sun. Sunday morning birdsong and the odd car. Outside her house, by 13th Street, the leftovers of her life. Brass floor lamp, split cushions, old books and pictures, wet through from last night's rain. Thank you all. That's what I would like to read today. And again, thank you so much for coming and joining me. Means the world to me. And I think if you'd like to stay, please stay and say what you'd like to say about the book. And if you have questions, then I'd be very happy to answer them. So thank you. And Lindsay, I think I hand things back to you at this point.
Thank you, Brian. Very beautiful job. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Lots of very kind words over here in the chat too. We're all very impressed with you. We have a fun little bonus in addition to the things that Brian has read. It's no Hollywood premiere, but we thought it might be fun. Let's check it out.
So this is Hill Cemetery, where I spend a lot of my time, and this has been a real place of inspiration for me. There are a number of poems in my book about Hill Cemetery, so we thought we'd come out here to be in the right place for me to read some of these poems and maybe say something about them. First date, Hill Cemetery. So what are you thinking as we walk together in the cemetery? That I might try to cross the gap between us, ask to hold your hand. I'm way ahead of you, past sleeping together, past getting married and making children and life stories. Further on, further. I see us in the ground together, in our shared grave, holding on to our love in the rich soil of Oak Hill. I have a sense that I can sometimes hear what the spirits here are saying, and this is what I thought I heard one time. So it's called just Oak Hill Cemetery. Save a life, my friend. Savor it. I did not, and it was snatched from me by an angry God. What I miss most? Sadness, because then, more than ever, I knew I was alive. You consider yourself immortal, like many other fools. Those bones inside you, where else can they speak in the end but in the ground? Make them dance while the music plays. Make them dance.
Skip on.
I stayed up.
Sorry about that bit.
This is called First Snow. I stayed up late, watching snowflakes fall, writing haiku. Then I went to sleep, dreamt of snow covering me in Hill Cemetery like a warm white shroud.
We plan on putting a few more of those together and putting them up on the website and our social media. So we had a great time being on site. A lot of the poems in the book are very location specific, so it's neat to be in the same area of some of these places. I hope you folks can have that experience at some point too. We will now open the floor for any sort of words of congratulations or questions for Brian, anything you would like to say. Please go ahead and raise your hand first so we don't all end up speaking over each other, and we'll go from there. Elaine, let's get it started. We'll have you unmute. I'll ask if you can unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. This is so cool. I'm sitting in Amsterdam. It's dark. It's the middle of the night. And I'm Brian's second cousin. Brian's
Hello.
father. Hi, Brian. And hi, Brenna. And hi.
Lucy.
Yes, she's there. Okay. And hi, Misi. There. Yes. I love it. Like you, Brian, I also write poems, very different from yours, I think. And I love some of your lines. It's just, oh! So this has been so cool. Keep on.
Thank you so much for coming, Wendy.
We're going to, yes, it's lovely. I'm just here. Amsterdam's going to snow tomorrow.
Thanks, Elaine.
Wendy.
Wendy.
Wendy. Elaine's my first name.
Okay.
Wendy. Yeah.
Appreciate it, Wendy.
Yeah. Thank
Mary
you.
Frances, was that a hand? Perhaps just a wave goodbye. Tyler.
Yes. Oh,
Tyler, my friend.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good to
It's
see you, man.
Forever since we've seen each other in person, huh?
Yeah, but we communicate a lot, so it's great to see you, man.
Yeah. I think Prodigal Son was probably my favorite poem. This guy, just like devoid of all familial responsibility, just going to live off the land. I think that was, of all the poems you read in your collection, I think that's the one that really spoke to me. That's the one that I think was that and the spider one, which just totally freaked me out, man.
Yeah, well, Gary's got lots of those stories too. Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. Yeah. I really, you paint a really good picture of just like Kansas as an area. I feel like I got a really good. I like the video you reading those poems in the cemetery. I think that was a good visual image of that. Just yeah, overall pretty good collection of poems. Just I really liked everything that you read out. And
yeah, thanks. It's always interesting to know which poems kind of resonate with people. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tyler. Al?
I'm here.
Otlani, good to see you.
Yeah. Hey, that was good, Brian.
Thanks.
This may be some of your strongest for quite a while. They really resonate. I love the way you end things like right in the middle. You know, that's cool. I just want you to know that my best friend was listening too.
That's what I like to see.
Yeah, and I really think he gets more out of these things than he lets on.
Right. Right.
But anyway, thank you for doing what you did. I'm always leery of Zoom because I'm I'm not very adept at anything technological, but I think I got on okay and it was cool. And I hope to see you in person before long.
Yeah, thanks so much, Al. It means so much to me that you came. Thank you.
We'll talk again.
Yeah, we will do. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Al.
You're
Laura, go.
welcome.
Okay, now, hi, Brian.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Well, I'd read the book before. This is an absolutely stunning and moving and beautiful collection. Well, as you already know, I think you're a great poet and you do many things well, but one thing I think you do particularly well is you create characters. You create pieces that are like micro stories, no, where you put yourself in the head of a person, a man or a woman. They've said here that you can do women characters very well, and it's true, but all kinds of characters, and you tell a story of somebody living in their own circumstances, and what you do is very much your own, but it reminds me a bit of Borges, no, who did the same thing, no, with characters, obscure characters he picked from Argentine history or Icelandic ancient history, and he went way back to choose his characters. And I wonder if you see yourself as part of a tradition in that sense, no? Or if you've ever thought that what you're doing, I mean, is a bit not exactly the same that he did, but that kind of thing of creating an ordinary character or recreating an ordinary character and giving him or her a story.
Yes, so I think if I'm in any tradition, it would be in the folk tradition. I love folk songs, and I love the idea that there are so many stories to tell, and that just as you say, it doesn't have to be the story of a prince or a king. It's the story of a guy who is like a farmer or something like that, and he has stories to tell. And I think too that in telling those stories, you're sort of telling the story of the place as well. And you pointed that out in what you wrote about the book, and I think that's quite right. That's what I'm trying to do. So yes, I certainly see that connection. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great to see you, Laura.
It's so nice to be able to be here tonight with you guys.
Thank you.
It's really nice having you. Thank you.
Great to be able to have Zoom. Like, you couldn't be able to do this without it, I don't think. Pull people from Amsterdam, England, collect them all together into one site. I think that is pretty nice that we're able to do that.
I think that's one good thing that's come out of this pandemic, that
I do
you
too.
can make these sorts of connections, and they're not sort of everything that you get when you gather people together, but they're still pretty good, and you can have pretty good classes like this, and you can do quite a lot in this way. And I'm honestly, I've been surprised this year how much you can connect with people in this way. And as you're saying, Tyler, it has its advantages. I don't think you could bring these people together in other ways.
Have you been having to teach classes like this?
Yes, yes, that's right. And the reason that I'm a little bit confident doing this now is because I've done a lot of it with KU classes, and I'm not very good with technology at all, but I've just had to kind of learn how to do it, and I feel a bit better about it now. So yeah, I've learned it over the last year or so to do as much as I can with it.
So like a writing class, if you did a writing, have you been doing like a writing classes over this too? Like how does that work?
It works the way that you make it work. I mean, it's not the classroom experience, but there are ways that you can kind of make it work, and that's what I've been trying to do with it. And in fact, I found that my classes were better than I thought they would be doing them in this way. I think that there is a kind of connection, and there is a kind of class spirit to doing classes in this way, and I've been really quite pleasantly surprised by that this works quite well.
Mm.
Would anybody else like to say anything or ask anything? Troy, go for it.
Brian,
Hey, Troy.
you know something, brother? You always speak all the way down, well, read, I guess, in this case, all the way down to the bottom of my soul. And I just thank you for it.
Well, I appreciate that so much from you, Troy. That means a lot to me. Thank you, sir.
Nothing but love for you and Messiah.
Thank you. Hey, appreciate it.
Okay, that's it. I'm done.
See you later, Troy.
All right, bye.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Lindsay. Brian, I just
Hello.
wanted to, hi there, Brian. I just wanted to say I read and enjoyed your entire book, but when I got to page 20, Missing Son,
yeah,
that poem hit me in the chest. That was a fist to the chest. I had to spend the next half hour on Google learning about this.
That's the poem about Linwood.
Yes.
Yeah.
About the young man. I guess probably because your references to the 70-year-old parents and who are 70 now. My son's graduated at about that time, so it seemed to tie in. My sons are still with me. There was no relation here to that in the poem, but I just can't imagine what these parents went through.
And are still going through, because this
They're
hasn't
still
been,
going through. Yeah,
this hasn't been
this
solved.
still hasn't been solved.
Yeah.
And the detective who worked on it is still agonizing over it.
Sure. Yeah, you just hope that one day something will come knock on your door, and
you almost know it won't.
Yeah, you wait and wait for it. Yeah, I was very much drawn to that story, as you can imagine. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for all your books too. I love them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brenna was wondering if you wanted to read Missing Son.
Certainly. So this was for me a more recent poem, and the Journal World did a cover story on this. I think it was because it was I think it was 30 years since the son had gone missing, and so this poem, unlike some of the others, I mean, it really is sort of non-fiction, and this is a story that is sort of still going on, called Missing Son. In 1989, their son, their only child, a high school senior at Linwood High, drove off in his mother's car to go to a party. He left the party late that night, and he's never been seen again. His parents are now in their 70s, and their biggest fear is dying without ever finding out what happened to him. The car's never been found. No trace of him, nothing. The KBI case still open. Private investigators came up with nothing, apart from rumors he was involved in a satanic cult, or killed by drug dealers, or crashed the car into Stranger Creek, where it sank in the mud and has never been found. All that's left are two parents still waiting up after 40 years for their son to come home. Almost time for them to sleep. You just want to know, and in too many of these cases, you just never know. And I could feel their grief in finding out about this story.
Thanks for reading that, Brian.
Sure.
I will hop in and say
congratulations. Hello.
Congratulations again, Brian. And as we all, listen to you reading these amazing poems, I would say you poured your heart and soul in poetry, and not only in your poems, but also in everything that you do. So you're an inspiration for me, I would say, and I hope for every one of us here. Yeah, I mean, I'm enchanted by the economy of language. Like in few words, you just hit the nail. It's amazing. And that's, as Alexander Pope said, like brevity is the soul of wit.
Yes, yes. Thank you. I hope we can get back into the classroom, Aya, and teach our class again, because I miss it like crazy. So
I know, like every time you email me about like how you miss the class, it's like I can feel it, really. It just like you are very much invested in everything you do and teaching the inmates and your students. So thank you so much.
yeah, thank you. It's great to know you. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to hop in? Yes, it says Gina, but I know. Let's see.
Yeah, it's Chris. Chris Helvey. Hi, Brian.
Chris, hi. Good to meet you, man. I've been
Yeah.
reading your book forever.
It's good to see you. I have a little different picture of you than I had otherwise, but it's all good. I thought your poems are wonderful. You know, I'm a little bit more of a novelist, but I think that good poets, and you certainly absolutely are one, do something that we novelists fail to do, and that is to capture the entire story in just a few words. And two that you read tonight that spoke so much to me were The Missing Husband and then Cooper City. And it was just a couple of little lines in Missing Husband, you know, when he said, you said, didn't take his wallet. He drives off in his Ford truck. That specificity and just that one little detail of leaving his wallet puts an entire different aura to that entire poem. It's you really, I think you're writing novels and poems. And Cooper City, of course, that was, I like that one. And just the image of old Zeke there in the window, wondering whether he was going to die before Cooper City or whether Cooper City was going to go before he was. I mean, there's so much truth in that, and that is a great capture of so many small towns like we all know, certainly in the Midwest. And I just thought it was wonderful. I'm just so glad I got the invitation, was able to make it and join you tonight. Thank you.
Great, Chris. Well, I've been enjoying your books for years, so keep sending them my way, you know?
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else? All right, folks. Well, this has been utterly delightful. Brian, I'm so happy for you. And I'm so glad that we were able to celebrate in this way. We really appreciate all of you coming from near and far. Keep your eyes on the mail for those books that are on the way to you. And otherwise, check out the Meadowlark website for more about Brian and Brian's book and some other Meadowlark books. So thank you all so much. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Brian.
Brian.
I'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jocelyn.
Great work,
Brenna.
Dad.
Hey.
This was a real joy, Brian.
Doug, thank you, man.
Thank you, Brian.
Antonio, good to see you. I want to see your dog.
He's sleeping.
Okay. Oh, I got to see that guy.
Yeah, he's a handful.
We'll stay in touch, Antonio. I'll see you soon.
See you, Brian.
Bye, Aya.
This was wonderful.